Welcome, everyone. So, if you're gearing up for your composition final, and let's be real, probably running on way too much caffeine right now, or if you just want to completely demystify the whole college writing experience, you are in exactly the right place. Think of this explainer as your ultimate toolkit. We are going to consolidate all those major concepts, skills, and vocabulary terms you've been grinding away at all semester into one clear, actionable guide.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting 1. The writing process, 2. Rhetorical foundations, 3. Documentation formats, 4. Looking ahead to next semester, and finally, 5. AI policies.
Section 1. The writing process, drafting and revision as a loop.
Right out of the gate, we need to completely shatter the myth that writing is a straight line. It's just not. Composition courses are built on a very specific premise, which is that writing is a recursive process. That simply means writers are constantly moving back and forth between stages. You brainstorm, you draft a little bit, realize you need way more ideas, and loop right back. Moving backward to fix things or generate new ideas, that isn't a failure on your part. It is the exact recursive process your instructors expect. And honestly, it's what they want to see. Now, before a draft can even exist, you need raw material, right? That is exactly where invention strategies come in. These are incredibly empowering tools meant to help you discover ideas before you start judging them. You might use free writing, where you literally just write continuously without stopping to edit. Or maybe you're more into brainstorming rapid, completely unfiltered lists. If you're a visual thinker, clustering lets you map a topic, say climate change, by branching ideas out from a center bubble. Or, you can always rely on those classic journalist questions to systematically build out content. The goal here is absolutely not good writing. It's literally just getting the gears turning.
So, the crucial point is this. Drafting is not the same thing as revising. Actually, one of the biggest productivity traps for novice writers is trying to write a quote-unquote perfect sentence before moving on to the next one. A first draft usually just begins with a working thesis, a provisional claim that guides you, but one you fully expect to tweak later. Your first draft's only job is just to exist, get the shape of your argument onto the page, and leave all that fancy polish for later. Okay, so once that draft actually exists, you enter the revision phase, and here you really have to separate your global concerns from your local ones. Revision literally means re-seeing the whole structure. It's asking the big global questions like, does this essay actually argue the point I want to make? Only after fixing that structural foundation should you move down a level to editing, which focuses on sentence-level clarity, things like active versus passive voice, and finally, at the very bottom, is proofreading. Seriously, never worry about commas or typos until the very end. If you mix these 3 stages up, you end up wasting so much time polishing a paragraph that you might just cut entirely anyway.
Section 2. Rhetorical foundations. Purpose, audience, and the rhetorical situation.
If the writing process is how you build an essay, the rhetorical situation is kind of like the underlying architecture that tells you what kind of building you need in the first place. You have to ask yourself, why am I writing this, and who am I writing it for? Strong writers always keep their stated audience in mind, anticipating objections and adjusting their tone on the fly. You've got to ask, how much background knowledge does this specific audience have? Are they sympathetic, or are they totally skeptical, meaning I need to address some heavy counterarguments? A really persistent challenge is that students often write exclusively for the instructor as grader. To truly elevate your writing, you've got to write for the specific audience your assignment dictates, even though, yes, your instructor is the one ultimately holding the red pen. And to successfully persuade that audience, we rely on Aristotle's 3 appeals. Ethos establishes your credibility and fairness as a writer. Pathos engages the audience's emotions. Though, a quick heads up, in academic writing, this is used very carefully and never as a substitute for hard evidence. And logos, well, that's the structure of reasoning itself, your claims, your evidence, and the logical warrants that connect it all together. Understanding these 3 appeals gives you a toolkit not just for constructing your own bulletproof arguments, but for critically dissecting the arguments of others. Moving on to Section 3, Documentation Formats, MLA, and APA Essentials. Now, I know citation can feel a bit dry, but this brilliantly illustrates that citations aren't just arbitrary, punitive rules designed to catch you messing up. They actually reflect the distinct logic of entirely different fields. In MLA, which is the primary format for the humanities, in-text citations emphasize the author and the page number. Why? Because in literature and cultural studies, tracing the exact wording in a specific text is absolutely paramount. But over in APA, used in the social sciences and nursing, the emphasis completely shifts to the author and the year. That's because, in the sciences, the currency of the research matters deeply. Knowing when to use which system is a massive, game-changing step toward true academic fluency. But regardless of whether you are using MLA's container system or APA's title case rules, there is one shared underlying logic. The golden rule is simply this: citation exists to let a reader locate your source. So why does this matter? Because every single in-text citation must have a matching entry in your works cited or references list. Whether you quote directly, summarize, or even just paraphrase an idea in your own words, you are obligated to cite it. You're basically leaving a trail of breadcrumbs so another mind can perfectly retrace your research steps.
Section 4. Looking ahead. Second semester research writing.
Now that we have those foundations completely locked down, let's pivot and look to the future. The skills you've just learned absolutely do not disappear in second semester research writing. But I've got to warn you, the stakes definitely get higher. So what exactly changes? First up, the scale. Those standard 3 to 5 page essays, they're going to grow into 8 to 12 page sustained arguments. Second is source density. Instead of working with 1 or 2 assigned readings, you'll be diving deep into library databases to locate and evaluate 6 to 10, maybe even more independent sources. But the biggest shift of all is how you start. You won't begin with a preformed thesis anymore. You're going to begin with a genuine, completely open research question, something you don't already know the answer to, and let the research itself guide you to your claim.
To handle all those new sources, you are going to need to master synthesis. Synthesis is literally the central skill of all research writing. It means putting sources into a conversation with one another. You aren't just making a list saying source A says X and source B says Y. No, you are synthesizing. You're saying something like, while source A highlights the economic benefits, source B actually complicates this by pointing out the steep environmental cost. Practicing this very specific habit of mind, distinguishing a simple summary from true, deep synthesis, is the single best predictor of your readiness for advanced research writing. Section 5. Know your instructor's AI policy. Every semester, every course.
All right, we now have to deal with a highly modern reality in academia. The golden rule here is incredibly simple. Never, ever assume AI policy is uniform across your classes. You need to ask yourself, and definitely your instructor, which stages of the writing process actually permit AI tools. Because writing courses treat the writing process as an act of thinking, not just churning out a final product, a policy that permits AI for one stage, like say brainstorming, does absolutely not mean it's allowed for drafting full paragraphs or generating your main thesis. Different acts have vastly different implications for your academic integrity. So here is your practical, everyday checklist. Please do not rely on a general vibe that your instructor is fine with AI. Get specific answers. Is it permitted at all? Does it vary by assignment? Do you need to openly disclose how you used it? Are you allowed to use it to locate sources, or maybe just to check your prose at the very end? Make it an absolute habit to ask these specific questions in the very first week of every single course moving forward. Don't guess. Protect your academic integrity at all costs. And that brings us to our final takeaway. Every single convention we've covered in this explainer today, from those recursive drafting loops we talked about, to anticipating your audience's needs, to perfectly formatting your APA references, it all exists for one unified reason. Writing is a tool for thinking with and communicating to another human mind. As you head into your finals and start looking toward next semester, the real question isn't whether you can scrape together enough words to fill an 8-page requirement. The real question is, now that you finally have the toolkit to change another person's mind, what exactly are you going to convince them of?